Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, staff writer Zach Everson. Zach, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I am in COVID jail, so this might be the only adult conversation I get all day.
Well, I am grateful to have you. I'm grateful for the conversation. And we have seen a really intense political week. Last week, we saw President Joe Biden drop out of the race. Moments later, he endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris. Since then, she has become the likely Democratic nominee, and she has seen some historic fundraising numbers. So to start off the conversation, talk to us about those numbers.
Yeah, she's doing gangbusters. There was really enthusiasm was lagging for President Biden's reelection effort, but once Harris came to the top of the ticket, the money started flowing. Her spokesperson tweeted the other day that they brought in over $200 million in her first week atop the ticket, which is just astronomical amount of money.
And you wrote this for Forbes. Billionaires loved Kamala Harris for 2020. How many are backing her for 2024? Out of this over $200 million, is a lot of that money from billionaire donors?
We don't really know that yet, and it can't be, because this is just campaign donations that we're looking at, and those are capped at $3,300 per person. So, if billionaires want to support her with donations directly to her campaign, there's a limit that they can do. The big money that they're able to back her with is if they were to support it to a super PAC that was affiliated with her, working on her behalf.
So over $200 million in just a week. That's incredible for any campaign to see. How does this compare to Trump's war chest?
Well, he had a $32 million advantage when she became as of, I guess it's the end of May, the end of June 30th, the end of June. So that $32 million advantage is largely evaporated. We'll get a better read on that in a couple weeks when the campaigns have to post their July numbers.
This isn't the first time that Vice President Kamala Harris is running for president. She ran during the 2020 race, but her campaign then didn't even make it to the year 2020. She suspended her campaign back in 2019. But you're reporting she did have the most billionaire donors. Talk to us about them.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see this. This is something that one of my colleagues reported back at the time, that through September 2019, when we did this analysis, 47 billionaires and their spouses had donated to Harris. Next up was Cory Booker, who had 45, and then Joe Biden at the time had 44. So it was really surprising seeing that much money coalesce from wealthy people along behind Harris so early. Especially, she didn't last all that long. I don't know if people really thought she was much of a serious candidate at the time. As you mentioned, she didn't even last until the 2020, the year of the election. And I think what most people remember from her candidacy is Maya Rudolph's impersonation on Saturday Night Live.
47 billionaires and their spouses donated back then. Have they all or some donated to Biden's reelection campaign and or now Kamala Harris's campaign?
Yeah, I was also surprised that this number is a bit lower. So 3 of those billionaires had passed away in the last few years. So of the 44 billionaires, 26 of them, or 60%, had donated to Biden's reelection as of the end of May. And again, we're just looking at campaign donations. So it's quite possible that some of these billionaires or their spouses did back Biden's efforts through donations to joint fundraising committees or the Democratic National Committee or super PACs. But looking at just donations to the campaign, that's 40% of them did not donate directly to Biden.
Let's name some names here. Who are some of those most notable billionaires first that donated to Biden's reelection campaign?
Yeah, so that would be Steven Spielberg, director. I don't know if I actually needed to include what his job was. I suspect everybody knows that. His wife, Kate Capshaw, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, and Lorraine Pearl Jobs, who's an entrepreneur and philanthropist and inherited her money from her late husband, Steve Jobs.
And what about those billionaires that donated back to Biden or Harris in 2020, but didn't donate to Biden once again in 2024?
So the names that stood out here were George Lucas and Craig Newmark, I think, from Craigslist. I think were the two names that most people would recognize from that list.
And did any billionaire go on the record and say why to you or to anyone in general they did not donate again to Biden's reelection campaign?
Yeah, so reached out to some of them, and There was one, Jim Clark, whose wife had been one of those people who donated to Harris, but not Biden. He said they just weren't all that enthused with Biden, that they just felt it was time for him not to run, and that they were very excited about Harris running, and that his wife had supported her in the past, and they plan to do so again in the future.
And I know you said earlier there's a threshold amount of money you can give to a campaign. What is that number? And then what are those billionaires who are donating more doing to work around that?
Sure. So the limit is $3,300 per election, and they count the primary and the general election separately. So they can donate up to $6,600 to a presidential campaign during the 4-year cycle. So, when we look at billionaire support by donating to a campaign, we're not talking about money that's really going to matter all that much. It's just a couple $100,000. But what matters is that they're showing that they do support this candidate, and there are other avenues for them to donate through. The biggest one being super PACs, where they can donate an unlimited amount of money. As we talked about a few weeks ago, Timothy Mellon, a Trump backer, donated $75 million to a super PAC working on behalf of Trump. So, the fact that all these billionaires are interested in Kamala Harris, it does mean that there could be some donations coming her way, to benefit her campaign via super PACs.
I mean, up until last week, Joe Biden was running for president. Joe Biden was the likely Democratic nominee. Now it's Vice President Kamala Harris. So I am curious what that transfer of money looks like, and is that legal? Can she legally get all of his money for the re-election campaign?
We will find out in about 5 years, I'm going to guess. Her name, it was very seamless from looking at FEC financial aspect. Her name just came in on an updated statement of authorization where she was listed as the candidate. If you search it up now, it just shows Kamala Harris, whereas like previous elections, if you look at that very same committee, it shows Joe Biden. So the Trump campaign, though, is arguing that she should not get that money. They're saying it's violation of the law. The experts that we spoke to, though, think there's no problem at all with doing this since she was on the ticket. And, the FEC, as I hinted at earlier, takes forever to figure out these kind of things. So it would be years. I mean, Harris could be done with a second term by the time the FEC were to issue something definitive on it.
Zach, you report on money in politics. So when you're looking at all of these millions of dollars raised in such a short amount of time, does anything surprise you? Is anything sticking out to you?
She's catalyzing the Democratic base in a way that Joe Biden just wasn't. And you're seeing that enthusiasm from several places. They've mentioned that they've had a huge swell in volunteers, and you're seeing it in this money. And that's money that's going to matter. That's stuff they can use for turning out the ground game and trying to get all of their voters to the polls, especially in those swing states.
Zach Everson, per usual, I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.